France's World Cup campaign ends in chaos as Adrien Rabiot blasts shameful team attitude after England thrashing. France's hopes of ending the FIFA World Cup on a positive note collapsed in dramatic fashion as Les Blues suffered a humiliating 6-4 defeat to England in the third place playoff. Now let's explore the complete story from every perspective on our AI podcast.
When you tune into a major international football match, especially at the sharp end of a World Cup, you are primed for, like, a tactical chess match.
Oh, for sure. You expect tightly organized defenses.
Right, exactly. Rigid discipline, and maybe, if the tension breaks, you might get 2 or maybe 3 goals total.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Right. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine sitting down, looking up at the global broadcast at the end of the 2026 World Cup third-place playoff and seeing the numbers 6 and 4.
It's just jarring.
6-4. That is not an elite football score. That is a chaotic neighborhood pickup game score.
It's really, it looks like a typo on the screen.
This was England versus France on the biggest stage. And hiding right behind that wildly absurd scoreline is the story of a massive, spectacular dressing room meltdown.
A total collapse.
Yeah. So welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to take you through all the reporting, the post-match interviews, and the tactical breakdowns to figure out how a team with arguably the best roster on the planet imploded so completely.
It really is a staggering collapse to analyze. And I think particularly because of the baseline we have to establish for you here, it's important to remember who we're talking about.
Right, these aren't underdogs.
Exactly. We are talking about absolute titans of the modern era. France won the World Cup in 2018.
Yeah.
They were the finalists in 2022, missing out by a fraction of an inch in one of the greatest matches ever recorded.
Unbelievable match, yeah.
So they walked into this 2026 tournament carrying this massive aura of invincibility, and they just had a profoundly deep roster.
Loaded in every position.
Exactly. Yet their campaign ended not in glory, but in this fractured, humiliating bronze medal clash. We are essentially looking at a masterclass in how off-pitch toxicity manifests directly on the grass.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand the interpersonal drama happening in the locker room, we first need to look at the mechanical disaster that took place on the pitch, right?
Yeah, you have to start there.
Specifically, we have to talk about that first half against England.
Oh man, the first 45 minutes, it was a tactical autopsy unfolding in real time.
It was painful to watch.
It really was. England, managed by Thomas Tuchel, didn't just run faster or shoot better. They systematically dismantled a team that had fundamentally stopped functioning as a unit.
They were just carving them up.
Totally. England raced to a 4-0 lead before halftime. And, for a team of France's pedigree, conceding 4 goals in a single half is almost mathematically impossible unless something is deeply broken at the root level.
So walk us through the mechanics of that. When a team of world-class athletes goes down 4-0 that quickly, what is actually happening geometrically on the field? Are they just getting out-sprinted?
Well, no, it's less about foot speed and more about spatial integrity.
Okay, what does that mean?
So in a functioning defense, players operate like a connected net. If an opposing attacker moves into a pocket of space, the midfield drops back, the defensive line shifts, and the net tightens.
They move as one block.
Exactly. But what Tuchel's England exposed was that France's net had completely unraveled. When England won the ball, the French forwards didn't track back.
Which is just a cardinal sin in modern football.
It is. And that forced the French midfielders to step up and try to win the ball completely alone, which left massive gaping holes behind them.
So the defense is just totally exposed.
Right. England's attackers essentially had acres of empty grass to operate in. The French center backs were left on an island, facing wave after wave of coordinated English attacks.
Wow.
So it wasn't a lack of physical speed,
Yeah.
It was a total collapse of defensive positioning and collective urgency.
It sounds like a structural failure.
Yeah.
Imagine an orchestra where the string section decides to play at double speed, the brass section refuses to read the sheet music, and the percussionist just walks off stage.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
Right, because individually they might be virtuosos, but collectively it's just agonizing noise.
Yeah.
The lack of collective effort is what creates those massive gaps you're talking about.
And the thing is, that lack of effort becomes contagious.
Oh, absolutely.
Once a player realizes his teammate isn't going to cover for his mistake, he stops taking risks. He stops making the extra run.
You just give up.
Yeah, The midfield, which usually acts as both the engine for the attack and the shield for the defense, just evaporated. They were giving the ball away under minimal pressure because no one was moving into open channels to receive a pass.
But here is a massive wrinkle in the narrative. We know they went into the locker room at halftime down 4-0.
Right.
But they actually came out in the second half and scored 4 goals, bringing the final tally to that bizarre 6-4 finish.
They did, yeah.
So my question for you is, does waking up in the second half and scoring 4 goals against England redeem them? Or does it just prove they had the capability the entire time but actively chose not to use it when the whistle first blew?
If anything, I mean, the second half performance is an indictment, not a redemption.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it strips away the excuse of fatigue or physical limitation. The capacity to compete at an elite goal-scoring level was demonstrably there.
They still had the legs.
Exactly. The issue in the first half was a conscious, or perhaps subconscious, withdrawal of labor.
Wow, a withdrawal of labor. That's a heavy way to put it.
But it's true. Scoring 4 goals when the game is already functionally lost and the pressure is off, that's easy.
Right. England is probably coasting a bit too.
Precisely. But putting in the grueling, unglamorous defensive work when the game is tied 0-0 requires systemic buy-in. And if we want to understand why that buy-in vanished, we don't even have to speculate.
No, we don't.
The players themselves decided to broadcast the internal rot to the entire world.
Yeah, which takes us straight to the post-match fallout. For you listening, there is a golden rule in professional sports, right? You keep the grievances inside the locker room.
Always. You never air dirty laundry.
Never. But Adrien Rabiot, the veteran French midfielder, completely torched that rule. Right after the match, Rabiot stepped in front of the microphones and launched a completely unvarnished attack on his own teammate.
It was unprecedented.
The quotes from the reporting are just staggering. He called their first half display shameful. He said the attitude was unacceptable.
Yeah.
And then he delivered the ultimate dagger, saying, quote, "I saw behavior from some players that I'd never seen before."
What's fascinating here is the sheer desperation it takes for a senior player to break that sacred locker room omerta.
Because that just doesn't happen.
No, in elite environments, you defend your teammates to the media no matter what. You absorb the criticism collectively.
You take the hit together.
Right. So for Rabiot to use highly emotive, condemning language like shameful, it tells us that the internal hierarchy of respect had completely disintegrated.
Wow.
He wasn't just venting frustration about a bad pass, he was indicting the character of his colleagues.
And the reports also mention that there's an incredibly heated, quote-unquote, honest discussion at halftime, right?
Yes, the halftime locker room was apparently a total powder keg.
I can't even imagine being a fly on the wall in there.
Right. Rabiot revealed that when they were staring down that 4-0 deficit, he and a few other veterans were essentially pleading with the squad to remember who they were playing for.
Just begging them to care.
Basically, yeah. He told the press that he reminded the room they cannot be content with sloppy play. He was trying to appeal to their historical pride, reminding them that even though they were still reeling from a heartbreaking semifinal loss to Spain just a few days prior, they had a fundamental obligation to represent the crest on their shirt with dignity.
But, the truly wild part of this entire saga is that you didn't even need access to that locker room to see the dysfunction.
Oh, absolutely not.
The cracks were being broadcast in high definition to millions of people.
Anyone watching could see it.
Yeah. During a hydration break in the first half, when England was already tearing them apart, the TV cameras locked on to Rabiot Cherki, the young Manchester City midfielder.
This moment was just unbelievable.
It really was. Didier Deschamps, the French manager, is standing there frantically trying to deliver tactical instructions, just trying to stop the bleeding.
Right.
And Cherki is literally caught on camera, waving his manager away and entirely turning his back on him.
That visual is a death knell for any coaching staff.
I mean, how does a coach come back from that?
They don't. We have to analyze what a moment like that means functionally. A manager's authority on a football pitch is essentially an illusion, right?
Yeah. It's just based on buy-in.
Exactly. It only exists because 26 highly paid, highly egotistical athletes agree to believe in it. So the moment a player dismisses the manager on a global broadcast, the illusion shatters.
It's just gone.
It signals to the opponent, to the fans, and crucially to the rest of the bench that the chain of command is completely broken. Cherki's wave wasn't just a disagreement over a tactical adjustment. It was a public declaration of anarchy.
And you better believe the domestic media in France seized on that anarchy.
Well, they tore them apart.
If you follow international football, You know that the French sports newspaper L'Équipe is infamous for its player ratings.
They are ruthless.
They grade on a scale of 1 to 10, and they are notoriously brutal. Like,
Right.
a 5 means you were aggressively mediocre.
A 5 is almost a bad day at the office for them.
Right. Well, the fallout from this match resulted in 3 Premier League stars on the French team, Ryan Cherki, Ibrahima Konate, and Malo Gusto, being handed a 2 out of 10.
A 2 out of 10 from L'Équipe is rare and just highly punitive.
It's embarrassing.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is the publication's way of stating that a player was not just ineffective, but actively detrimental to the team's survival.
All liability.
Yeah, it goes way beyond missing a tackle or misplacing a pass. A rating that low is an assessment of a player's professional integrity on that specific day. It implies that you abandon your post.
But, I mean, obviously, Rabiot's post-match explosion and a touchline mutiny don't just manifest out of thin air during a single 45-minute window against England.
No, absolutely not.
This kind of rot takes time to set in.
It does, and the reporting makes it clear that this was a systemic failure that had been brewing under the surface for a while.
Yeah.
The warning lights were flashing violently just days earlier, immediately following their semifinal exit against Spain. The tactical foundation had already begun to crack.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It wasn't just Rabiot sounding the alarm. It was the captain, Kylian Mbappe.
Right, the biggest star in the world.
Following that loss to Spain, Mbappe stood in front of the press and publicly dissected France's tactical execution. He pointed a spotlight directly at their failure to communicate.
Which is very telling.
Yeah, he noted that Spain was able to utterly dominate possession of the midfield because France couldn't coordinate their pressing triggers. They failed to impose any sort of collective game plan.
And, to understand the weight of Mbappe's critique, we really have to look at the mechanics of pressing in modern football.
Break that down for us.
You can think of a high-pressing team, like a highly sensitive power grid. The entire system relies on simultaneous, synchronized action.
Okay.
If the striker pushes forward to pressure the ball, the midfield has to step up perfectly in sync to cut off the passing lanes, and the defense has to squeeze the space behind them.
So everyone has to move together.
Exactly. It requires immaculate timing and profound trust. If even one player, one substation on that grid, decides not to run or hesitates for half a second, the opponent easily passes the ball into the gap.
And the whole thing breaks down.
Yes, the resulting surge of attacking electricity overloads the rest of the defense. So Mbappe was essentially telling the world, our grid is failing because we aren't communicating and we don't trust each other to move together.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
If Mbappe is the one wearing the captain's armband, and he knows in real time that the tactical execution is failing and the communication is dead, isn't that a massive indictment of his own leadership?
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
I mean, you are the captain, so you can be the one on the pitch physically organizing that grid, grabbing people by the shirt if you have to, and coordinating that pressure. Isn't he basically holding a press conference to complain about his own failure to lead the team?
It's a compelling point, and, the source material does highlight that Mbappe publicly acknowledged his share of the blame.
Okay, so he didn't totally deflect.
No, he went on record saying that leaders must absorb the criticism after a defeat just as willingly as they accept the praise after a victory. But your pushback actually illuminates the central crisis of this French squad.
Which is what?
Well, a captain can only organize a team that wants to be organized. In modern football locker rooms, authority isn't just granted by an armband. It has to be earned and maintained. The reporting points to a severe generational and cultural disconnect between veteran leaders like Mbappe and Rabiot and the younger contingent of the squad.
Ah, so there's a real split there.
A huge one. If a captain is shouting instructions to tighten the press and the younger players simply decide they don't want to expend the energy, the captain becomes just a guy shouting in an empty room.
So if we pull all these threads together, you have a squad divided by a generational rift. You have a tactical system that relies on trust in a locker room, totally devoid of it.
Yeah.
You have veteran players calling their teammates shameful in the press. And you have young stars waging away the manager on international television.
A complete mess.
It really is. And this all leads inevitably and honestly, quite tragically, into the managerial fallout.
The collateral damage at the top was completely unavoidable. This 2026 World Cup was scripted to be Didier Deschamps' glorious final act.
Yeah, his swan song.
Exactly. And to contextualize his gravity for a second, he captained France to a World Cup victory as a player in 1998.
A legend.
He then returned as manager to win it all again in 2018 and marched them right back to the final in 2022. He is an absolute titan of French sporting history.
His resume is untouchable.
It is. This tournament was supposed to be his triumphant ride into the sunset.
And instead of a sunset, his tenure ends in a smoke-filled room of recrimination. He suffers back-to-back, deeply painful losses to Spain and England, and his final image on the global stage is watching a 20-something midfielder treat him like a nuisance during a hydration break.
It is a remarkably bitter exit for a tactician of his historical stature. He fundamentally deserved a more dignified ending.
For sure.
But elite international football is a ruthless ecosystem. It just has zero capacity for sentimentality. Once the players stop running for you, the historical trophies don't matter at all.
So what does this all mean? Where does the French national team go from this incredibly toxic inflection point?
Yeah.
Because the reality is the talent isn't going anywhere.
No, there's still stats.
These players don't just vanish into thin air.
That is exactly where the reporting shifts to the horizon. With Deschamps stepping down, the unanimous expectation is that Zinedine Zidane, another legendary former captain and highly decorated manager, is going to take over the national team.
Wow. Zidane stepping in is massive. It's literally football royalty replacing football royalty.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the sheer arsenal of talent he is going to inherit, it's mind-boggling. He walks into a room with Kylian Mbappe, Eduardo Camavinga, Aurelien Tchouameni, William Saliba, plus an entire conveyor belt of emerging elite prospects.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
For you listening, it's like a new CEO being handed the keys to a company with a monopoly on the market and unlimited capital.
It is an incredible concentration of assets, certainly, but if we connect this to the bigger picture we've been painting, Zidane's primary challenge has absolutely nothing to do with tactics.
Right, the football part is easy.
Exactly. Managing this French team isn't like driving a luxury car. It's like being handed the controls to a highly volatile nuclear reactor.
That's a great way to look at it.
The power output is limitless, but if the internal cooling systems, the trust, the communication, the shared sacrifice fail, the entire thing melts down.
And we just saw the meltdown.
Right. So Zidane doesn't need to teach these men how to strike a football. His mandate will be acting as a diplomat and a high-stakes psychologist.
He's going to have to do a lot of couples therapy.
A ton of it. He has to step into a fundamentally fractured environment and convince players who were publicly calling each other shameful to trust each other enough to track back on defense.
So the job is essentially 80% cultural repair and 20% tactical alignment.
I'd say so, yeah.
I mean, you can have the most brilliant, innovative minds in your corporate division, but if they are actively working in silos, undermining each other in the press, and openly ignoring management directives, the quarterly results are going to be a disaster.
Guaranteed.
Zidane commands immense respect simply by walking into a room. But respect alone doesn't heal deep-seated resentments.
Precisely. Respect might get the players to stand up straight when he enters the locker room, but it won't magically make a midfielder run 60 yards to cover a defensive mistake in the 88th minute.
That takes real intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, that requires a collective culture that has been entirely dismantled over the course of this tournament.
This entire saga provides such a fascinating look at the hidden, internal mechanics of a high-profile collapse.
It really does.
And it really leaves you, the listener, with a powerful takeaway that applies far beyond the pitch. Whether you are leading a corporate restructuring, managing a creative agency, or just trying to keep a weekend project together, raw talent is never a substitute for cohesion.
Never.
In elite environments, the margin between absolute genius and a 6'4" humiliation isn't skill. It's systemic buy-in.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
The moment the members of a team decide their colleague isn't worth covering for, the math of the entire operation breaks down. A toxic culture will always, inevitably, consume individual brilliance.
I couldn't agree more. And, as we close the book on this tournament, this raises an important question that goes beyond just France.
What's that?
We've spent a lot of time analyzing how a new manager like Zidane might go about fixing this broken culture. But I want you to think back to that hydration break with Ray in Turkey.
Oh man, the wave.
Right, the wave. If the modern player feels empowered and insulated enough to physically wave away a World Cup winning manager on a live global broadcast, we have to ask a bigger question.
Which is?
Does the real power in elite football now rest entirely with the superstar athletes rather than the tacticians standing on the touchline?
Oof, that's a tough one.
And if the balance of power has permanently shifted, Is any manager, even one as revered as Zidane, actually capable of fixing a team that simply does not want to be fixed?
Man, that is a heavy, paradigm-shifting thought to end on. If the inmates truly are running the asylum, the coach is just a guy with a whistle.
Basically, yeah.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the collapse of the French national team. Keep digging into the sources you read, keep questioning the underlying dynamics of the teams and organizations you see around you, and most importantly, keep your curiosity alive.
Thanks for listening.
Because sometimes, when you look up at a scoreboard and see a ridiculous, chaotic result like 6-4, you realize the true story isn't the data on the screen, it's the complete breakdown of the human beings behind it. We'll catch you next time.
Okay, one question for you. Do you think Adrien Rabiot was right to publicly criticize his teammates after France's heavy defeat to England, or should such issues have remained private inside the dressing room to protect team unity? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.